Did you know that there's a little trick that you can do to potentially double your sales, right? And this is going to give you a bit of cred, a bit of extra trust, right? Improve your reputation, give you some buzz. And it's all about trust badges. This is what we call the badge effect. And it's a proven way to just give yourself instant credibility, and you will just see your conversions improve. Hey, I'm Chris Munch, founder of AmpiFire, and I help businesses drive organic traffic from search, social, video, and more so that you can make more sales. You probably are aware that, trust online is at an all-time low, right? There's tons of junk content being thrown out there. There's a lot of scams and a lack of trust. And so on a subconscious level, when people see that you've been covered in the media, that you're putting content out there, that maybe you're putting content on YouTube, you've got a podcast, all these sorts of things, right? And you put out a badge on your important pages, and this has literally seen a 400% increase in conversions. That's definitely not typical, but it's more typical around kind of like about the 7, 10, 15, 20% range. And we'll show you some studies on this because it's just a simple psychological thing, right? If you get featured on big websites, if you're associated with big brands, people tend to trust you more, right? And so this is what we call the badge effect, and it's a proven way to just give yourself instant credibility, and you will just see your conversions improve. Okay, so step one is actually get covered in the media, right? Put out content in a lot of places, and then you can put one of these badges out. And so we've built distribution relationships with hundreds of websites, and we put out a lot of content which allows you to do something like this. But if you've been covered in the media, right, and you haven't shown this on your important pages, just with a few logos, you should do this, okay? And so we already know that if you're driving a lot of traffic and it's not converting, okay, then you have a problem. And so anything that you do, you invest a lot in traffic, you invest in a lot of growing in your business. So you should be doing whatever you can to improve the trust signals, right? And so the badge effect, there's some hard data with this where we've seen these big improvements in conversion. If you think about it, just a 14% increase in conversion rate, right? Where, say it's a business doing $10,000 a month, that can be an additional $1,400 per month in revenue. That's $16,000 per year. And, typically when you increase your monthly income, it's going to come at a higher profit margin because essentially you're already covering your fixed costs, right? So any little increase you have has a big impact on the take-home profits in your business. And, this has been seen across studies. So we took a look and, went through and looked at all the published studies to see, what are the sort of conversion rates that people are seeing by adding these trust badges and similar things, okay? And so it's really, really significant. Some have seen a 400% increase. That's certainly not normal and not to be expected, although possible, right? But it's not particularly unusual to be seeing, 10, 20, 30% increases. And I can say that whenever we've added trust badges, we do see a bump 5, 10, 20, 30% in conversions when we do this, okay? Occasionally we might forget, okay? And so when you look at this of like, well, how much money can you make by adding a trust badge? Well, if you take, say, a dental clinic, right, which say averages $1 million per year, 70% of its traffic or it's essentially its sales are coming from online sources, okay? So 70% of people are researching online, right, before they go to the dentist, and then say half of those actually go to the website. Many of them might just call them from Google Maps, right? And so essentially, 70% of 1,700,000, half that is 350,000 that's going through the website. So if you bump, say, 10% on $300,000, okay, well, that's like an extra $30,000 in revenue, right? So it doesn't take much for when it comes to increasing the conversions of your business to actually have a massive impact. So it's something to really consider, and so what's the best placements for these? So we use these on our own websites, right? And so when you've got these trust badges, and I'll show you how to set these up in just a moment, okay, you do want to place them in prominent positions. So, normally you're going to put them above the fold, okay, on important pages or the home page or whatever high intent page it is, where it's requesting a demo, it's an expensive product, right? It's on the sales page, whatever that might be. You can put it near the call to action buttons as that last little trust factor. And so product pages and important pages on your site, and then putting it essentially where people will see it, either when they first land on the page or as they scroll down and then they're at that decision point. That's where they have the most impact, okay? And essentially, you want to make sure that the badges you use, okay, and ones which people recognize. So, if it's not a site that your audience might know about, okay, right? So for example, say in this one, I might remove digital journal because it's maybe not so well known to our audience, right, as some of these other ones. So essentially, right, each logo doesn't want to be too big. I think overall, it's about typically 400 to 800 pixels. You want a high resolution image. It needs to be high quality. And you can also use monochrome versions, and I'll show you how you can just quickly do this as well. So that essentially, that they're not too eye-catchy. So people see the logos, but it doesn't distract them. I don't recommend linking. Some people want to link on this to kind of show that, hey, this is where our coverage is, but that also can be like a little bit of a distraction. So let's look at how you can go ahead and get one of these yourself, right? So if you've distributed content through AmpiFire, then essentially you can just click on the trust badge. You can see, we've been published here in hundreds of places. And if we go down to the trust badge right here, then we can customize this. So we can, of the sites that we publish to, it doesn't have all of them, just like the biggest brands on here, which are the most important, which we know convert. And so we might say, well, Street Insider is a little bit less known, Medium's less known. Okay, Benzinga is not so relevant in my niche, but people care about Google News. They watch YouTube, so they want to see that, we're potentially publishing content or being spoken about on YouTube, right? And, could choose Pinterest, Apple, but we'll go with Spotify here, okay, or Apple. And then you can choose the background color, you can change the text color, and you can monochrome the colors of the logos here. So I'll just kind of match my own brand here and just go ahead with that. Okay, and then if we update the badge, then we can now see that the logos here have now shown in monochrome as well. Okay, so using just the colors here. So these are the types of things, which you can do to increase conversions, have it match your site. And of course, if you've been featured on the media and you've been featured on some big sites, grab the logos, put it on your website, right? This is just one of the ways which you can do this and do it pretty quickly and easily. Okay, and so we've got a whole blog post, which takes you through all of this stuff and discusses this in case you want to read this and lists all of the studies here and everything else that you can take a look at. But ultimately, when you do this, don't take my word for it. Don't assume that this is going to work for your site. In rare cases, it might not work, right? For whatever reason, you might put this on, and for some reason, it's distracting, or it affects the conversions in some other way. And so while typically you will get better results, you always want to test this stuff. Okay, so use a split testing software, right? Like Visual Website Optimizer or Optimizely are a couple of examples where you're essentially going to test version 1 versus version 2. You could also test different places that you put the badges, things like this, and see which one has the best conversions. Does it work better when you have it on the website, which is usually the case? What colors might work, what placement might work. You always need to test when it comes to conversions, okay? And you might be wondering, will this work for your business? Well, data has shown that this pretty much works in any industry, in any niche, but like I said, always test it, okay? And this is pretty simple to do. So if you know how to put HTML on a website, you know how to do a blog post, right? And you can copy and paste, then you're gonna be able to do this, or you can just take a screenshot, right? And you can just upload it to your site, the images, okay? So it's pretty straightforward, especially if you're using, something like this where you're just copying the HTML here. And essentially, as soon as this is on, it's gonna have an immediate impact on your business, okay? And so, essentially when you're adding these trust badges, you're gonna get a higher conversion rate, which means you're getting better ROI on the traffic, you're making more profit, okay? And with more profit, you can improve the product, invest more in marketing, okay, all of these different things, which gives you more potential to get more media coverage, right? But just in general, business is growing, more sales, more revenue, with more customer success stories. And essentially, as you have more customer success stories, you can be showing client logos, which is very similar to as seen on badges. Plus, you're more likely to start to be covered in the media, so you'll have even more as seen on badges, which you can choose from, okay? And ultimately, this is increasing the trust. And the interesting thing is when people come in trusting you, they actually tend to stick around for longer as well. Okay, so it's not like you put a trust badge on, you have this kind of like wheel turning and then, it just like blows up. That typically doesn't happen, but you will see knock-on effects of this, that by having this on there, just increasing your conversions. Anything you can do to increase your conversions is going to improve your overall business and just make things easier. Okay, so if you've got the option to go ahead and add a badge like this to your website, right, then go ahead and do it. And you can also, be using, say, AmpiFire here for your results, where essentially, you can be putting out videos, right, blog posts, podcasts, slideshows, doing this extremely quickly, and then publishing, right, across hundreds of sites. And, that's one way that you can go ahead and get all of this coverage and be able to add the logos to your site. And of course, if you like this video and you found this interesting, then check out our YouTube channel, right? Some great stuff on here to help you grow traffic for your business, right? With multi-channel organic traffic, right? So traffic from all over, from all sorts of different sources, leveraging AI to make it easier, okay? And so there's some great stuff on here. And so one particular one you might be interested in, how we quietly made millions in sales by just publishing content and publishing it in a lot of places. So this is one that you might want to check out here, okay, to kind of understand how by putting out a lot of content in a lot of places, how this ends up impacting your business and driving a lot of traffic, the timeline, how long it takes, and so on. Okay, so this is an older one, but still very, very useful. So catch you in the next one.